you know Jesus Christ? Do you know the Lord? And I think that's a great thing, but not everybody has that capability of just outwardly saying that in the Walmart grocery store line. They just can't come out that way. And so sometimes it just comes out in your authenticity and your sincerity and just being natural. But when you're intentional and when you're natural, I think you'll see the opportunities that God presents before you to spread his word.
That's right. Intentional and natural become supernatural.
That's right. That's right. That's good.
Oh man.
Absolutely.
Now what's like, for example, intentional? Can you give somebody like a real, let's say this week, what would be a real world example of that happening maybe in your life, where you're intentional? What would you be, how would you feel? What would you be walking into? Give people some ideas of what that means.
Yeah, I think and being intentional in different ways comes with sort of this preparedness. Um, I am walking into every situation, every circumstance in life, intentionally seeking opportunity to spread the gospel of Christ. So, if I go to the grocery store and I see somebody, doesn't have a couple dollars to pay for something, and I can intentionally provide that resource to them or whatever, it opens a door up to where, hey, thank you for that. And it opens a door to where you can intentionally say, look, I just wanted to help somebody the way my Lord helps me, the way Jesus helps me. And I know that's your run of the mill type of scenario, I guess. But just in the children's home environment, I'll just give an example there. Being intentional in the children's home environment is sort of like every single day while we're exposing these children to Christ in ways that that they've never been exposed to Christ before. Many of them have never stepped foot inside a church building, have never had a two-parent home that they've lived in. Some of them don't even have 3 meals a day, like so many often do. And so just being intentional and your conversation and relationship building with the people who you encounter, with this idea that when that door opens, I'm going to do anything I can to glorify Jesus. And so I don't say it's about me, and I don't say I don't do this to glorify me, but if I can somehow point back to Christ and I can say, no, I'm glad I had the opportunity to help you, but I would have never done it had Jesus not helped me first. Then that's just to me, that's being intentional to spreading the gospel of Christ.
That's good. So like getting out there, and even though you said it was run of the mill, going in the store, it's still tough for everybody. So those of you listening, everything's going to be hard because obviously, does Satan want us to share the good news? No. So it's
Right.
not going to be easy.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. By run of the mill, I don't mean that it's an easy thing to do. It's just, those are sort of the stories that
That's
we
right.
typically hear. And those are so praiseworthy stories,
Yeah.
but there are so many ways that we can be intentional without having to do something that is, what we would view in our world. Oh, wow, that's a really magnificent or really grand gesture or something like that. I mean, giving somebody $2 for a lunch or whatever, or giving them $5 for lunch, or is just as grand a gesture if it's found in spreading the gospel of Christ as anything else.
Well, love's powerful. I mean, the reason really God gave us the tool of love to reach the lost. So when you paid for the thing, the food or whatever they needed, that was an expression of love that came from nowhere to them. They don't know you.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
so intentional, be intentional, be ready out there. What's another strategy you got?
All
Gotta
right.
be.
The number 2B, yeah, be relational. And that really ties into this idea of intentionality as well. I think relationships are so key to showing Jesus in your life and giving Jesus to other people. Building those relationships. I mentioned earlier that, and I know this lady I went to church with in Georgia. She was so good at going to the grocery store, going to the mall. I mean, I've seen it from her sometimes, and she would just randomly stop this person and go, "Do you know Jesus Christ?" And I just thought, man, that is a talent. And she had this way about it where she could do it, and it was just, I mean, it just this peace and this comfort just exudes from her, and people welcomed that. But if the big bearded, burly man comes to you and says that, sometimes that's not, it's not as a useful a tool for me all the time. And so what's a very useful tool for me is to build relationships with people around me, and to be deliberate about building relationships, to be intentional about building relationships, and just to simply be relational. Because if I can have a relationship with you, then that itself opens a door to telling you about Jesus Christ. I think about Paul's words in Philippians there. If I'm going to live this life, I'm going to live it for Christ. And so if you can build a relationship with me, then the love I show you, I'm going to show you, is from Jesus Christ. It's not from Todd, it's from Jesus. And you think about, there's so many biblical characters who you can see this in. I think about Paul and how he goes from persecutor to passionate preacher. And he's going around to these very people who he was persecuting, and now he's preaching the gospel of Christ. If he wasn't relational, if he didn't build relationships with these people, how could he be impactful in their connection? And so I think that's so vital. And again, at the children's home where we work, it's so important that you build relationships. These kids come from very traumatic backgrounds. They come from emotionally draining backgrounds. They come from backgrounds where they've, things that are difficult to even comprehend a young child going through. And when they get here, they can be difficult. But the most important thing is to understand that it's not always, even that difficulty is not always personal. Very rarely is it ever a personal thing. And if I can somehow break through that hard shell by being relational with you and being intentional with you, then it can open up doors to so many different avenues of showing you the love of Christ.
That's good. Yeah, and I think when you have a relation with someone, then there's two things. They either think you're selling them something or you're sharing something with them. If it's relational, they know you're sharing. If it's not relational, they just think you're selling. You walk up to somebody, do you know Jesus? They're like, well, you just want to get me in your church and get money or something. But if you have a relationship with them, you can share.
Yeah, if I just can mention real quick, if I'm going to invite somebody to go to the movie theater with me and watch a movie, if I go to the random stranger on the side of the street and say, hey, do you want to go to the movies with me? There's this movie that I'm really going to enjoy. I'm going to go watch this movie. What are the odds of that stranger going with me versus me asking my next door neighbor who I have a relationship with? The odds are very different. And if we're sharing something that is experiential, that is transformational, and that is important as the gospel of Christ, start with building that relationship. And the impact could just go a whole lot further.
That was an awesome story. I like the movie one. It makes good sense. Thanks. So what's the other B you got? The third B in sharing your faith?
Yeah, I mentioned it. I kind of slid it in there earlier. So here it is. It's be prepared.
Okay.
Be prepared. And I'm going to tell a story here in a minute that's going to talk about that preparation. Of course, you think 1 Peter chapter 3:15, the idea of always being prepared to defend the gospel of Christ. You're thinking about 2 Timothy and preaching the word in season and out of season and all of the time. And so there's, of course, the passage on 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 2 about being preaching in season, out of season. This idea to the Christian core, being a Christ follower is always being prepared. And, when we're studying scripture, when we're learning, when we're going to church and Bible class and worship, it's not just for a self-benefit.
You've been listening to Be Brave. The world right now is a crazy place, and sharing the love of God is the most important thing we can do right now. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit up gobebrave.org. Remember, the love of God is the most powerful force in the universe. Learn how to love like Jesus. See you next time.